Good day, everyone. So we are here to present to you our lesson, which is Global Food Security. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Jhon Cordelin, and together with my group mates, BAYAS MABEL DINGGO APRILLE, DONGUIS LOUDILYN, MANILANG JHEMMA, PADKIW SOLANO FLOYD, TIMPAC ACADEMY, TOKIAS GLECK, and TOKIAS JAIME. What is food and food security? As we all know that food is one of the basic necessities of humans. Food security is about the ability of every human being physically, economically, and socially to gain access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food to accommodate their dietary plans and food preferences in order to get a healthy life. Food security is affected by many factors such as food system, nutrition, and climate change that will lead us to food insecurity. The concerns of nutrition and food security includes malnutrition and hunger. Climate change plays an important role in global food security system that is root cause of food insecurity. Climate change is the major challenge for global food security, especially in drylands countries like in the Middle East and Africa. Climate change gives potential impact on the four bases of food security. So these are the four bases that would help to find every country's food security conditions: availability, accessibility, utilization, and stability. These food systems conditions affect the decisions of every human being on their dietary plans, nutritional status, and sustainability of the food system. Food security as defined by United Nations Committee on World Food Security means that all people at all times have a physical, social, and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food that meets their food preferences and dietary needs for an active and healthy life. Over the coming decades, a climate, growing global population, rising food prices, and environmental stressors will have significant yet uncertain impacts on food security. Adaptation strategies and policy responses to global change, including processing and food prices and safety, are urgently needed. IFPRI's work on food technologies building securities includes analysis of cash transfers, promotions of sustainable agricultural technologies, building resilience to shocks, and managing trade-off in food security, such as balancing the nutritional benefits of meat against the ecological cost of its production. So what is global food security all about? Global food security refers to the availability and accessibility of an individual to get sufficient quantity of food that is reliable and affordable to the individual. The availability of adequate, safe, and clean food supplies of basic foodstuffs to sustain a steady expansion of food consumption scarcity and to the offset fluctuations in productions and prices as brought by emerging challenges on food productions and consumptions around the world, like food poisonings and other food related illnesses. So these are the four pillars of food security. Letter A. Physical availability of food. Food availability addresses the supply side of food security and is determined by the level of food production, stock levels, and net trade. This includes domestic productions, the imports, and the capacity of a country, and the availability of food stocks. Next one is letter B, economic and physical access to food. It concerns about insufficient food access have resulted in a greater policy focuses on incomes, expenditure, markets, and prices in achieving food security objectives. An adequate supply of food at the national or international level does not it itself guarantee household level food security. So, this includes the physical and the economic access to food which they are affected by purchasing power, income, and support infrastructures and other like transportation and market. Next one is letter C, food utilization. It is a sufficient energy and nutrient intake by individuals, which resulting of good care and feeding practices, food preparation and diversity of diet, and intra-household distribution of foods. Utilization is commonly understood as the way of body makes the most of various nutrients in the food. It also combined with good biological utilizations of food consumed, and this determines the nutritional status of individual, just like what I have said a while back. Letter D is food stability. Food stability is an adverse weather conditions, political instability, or economic factors such as employments, rising food prices, and the like, and may have an impact on our food security status. Even if your food intake is adequate today, you are still considered to be food insecure if you have inadequate access to food on periodic basis, risking a deterioration of your nutritional status, adverse weather conditions like and the like.
We have this duration and severity of food insecurity. Well, not all households or people suffer inadequate food consumption for the same period of time. This may vary from a short term experience to a lifelong condition. However, analysts have found it helpful to define two general types of food insecurity. What are these two? First, chronic food insecurity. This is taken as a long term or persistent. It occurs when people are unable to meet their minimum food requirements over a sustained period of time. And second, transitory food insecurity. This is short term and temporary. It refers to a sudden drop in the ability to produce or access enough food to maintain a good nutritional status. Chronic and transitory food insecurity is also distinguished by the different causes. Chronic food insecurity is often the result of extended periods of poverty, lack of assets, and inadequate access to productive or financial resources. Conversely, transitory food insecurity is primarily caused by short-term shocks and fluctuations in food availability and food access, including year-to-year variations in domestic food production, food prices, and household incomes. An intermediate type of food insecurity is seasonal food insecurity. Seasonal food insecurity occurs when there is a cyclical pattern of inadequate availability and access to food. This is associated with seasonal fluctuations in the climate, cropping patterns, work opportunities, or prevalence of diseases. For example, food shortages may occur in the pre-harvest period when on-farm stocks are depleted and other sources of food are not available. In rural communities, it is common to talk hungry periods and periods of plenty related to the agricultural calendar or cyclical availability of employment. The severity of food insecurity. When analyzing food insecurity, it is not enough to know the duration of the problem that people are experiencing, but also how intense or severe the impact of the identified problem is on the overall food security and nutrition status. This knowledge will influence the nature, extent, and urgency of the assistance needed by affected population groups. Different scales or phases to grade or classify food security have been developed by food security analysts using different indicators and cut-off points or benchmarks. Examples include A. Measuring the severity of undernourishment. The measure for hunger compiled by Food and Agriculture Organization, defined as undernourishment, refers to the proportion of the population whose dietary energy consumption is less than a predetermined threshold. This threshold is country-specific and is measured in terms of the number of kilocalories required to conduct sedentary or light activities. The undernourished are also referred to as suffering from food deprivation. The severity of undernourishment indicates, for the deprived, the extent to which dietary energy consumption falls below the predetermined threshold. B. Vulnerability. The dynamic nature of food security is implicit when we talk about people who are vulnerable to experiencing food insecurity in the future. Vulnerability is defined in terms of following three critical dimensions: vulnerability to an outcome from a variety of risk factors because of an inability to manage those risks. Indeed, a person can be vulnerable to hunger even if he or she is not actually hungry at a given point in time. Vulnerability analysis suggests two main intervention options to reduce the degree of exposure to the hazard and increase the ability to cope. By accounting for vulnerability, food security policies and programs broaden their efforts from addressing current constraints to food consumption to include actions that also address future threats to food security, and lastly, hunger, malnutrition, and poverty. It is important to understand how these three concepts are related to food insecurity. Hunger is usually understood as an uncomfortable or painful sensation caused by insufficient food energy consumption. Scientifically, hunger is referred to as food deprivation. Simply put, all hungry people are food insecure, but not all food insecure people are hungry, as there are other causes of food insecurity, including those due to poor intake of micronutrients. Malnutrition. Malnutrition results from deficiencies, excesses, or imbalances in the consumption of macro and micronutrients. Malnutrition may be an outcome of food insecurity, or it may relate to non-food factors such as inadequate care practices for children, insufficient health services, and an unhealthy environment. And lastly is poverty. Poverty is undoubtedly a cause of hunger. Lack of adequate and proper nutrition itself is an underlying cause of poverty.
Let's now proceed to the fifth part of the lesson, which is the 5 Rome Principles for Sustainable Global Food Security. These 5 Rome Principles was adopted in November 2009 by the World Summit in Rome. It also provides a powerful strategic underpinning for coordinated action by all stakeholders at global, regional, and country level, while embracing the twin-track approach to fighting hunger. These are the 5 principles. First principle is invest in country-owned plans aimed at channeling resources to well-designed and results-based programs and partnerships. Second is to foster strategic coordination at national, regional, and global level to improve governance, promote better allocation of resources, avoid duplication of efforts, and identify response gaps. Third principle is strive for a comprehensive twin-track approach to food security that consists of: first, it is the direct action to immediately tackle hunger for the most vulnerable. Second is the medium and long-term sustainable agricultural, food security, nutrition, and rural development programs to eliminate the root causes of hunger and poverty. including the progressive realization of the right to adequate food. Fourth principle is to ensure a strong role for the multilateral system by sustaining improvements in efficiency, responsiveness, coordination, and effectiveness of multilateral institutions. Last principle, which is the fifth, ensure sustained and substantial commitment by all partners to investment in agriculture and food security and nutrition, with the provision of necessary resources in a timely and reliable fashion, aimed at multi-year plans and programs. Which is the global response to food security. First here is increased production through horizontal expansion, increased areas under cultivation through technological interventions, greater water availability, and using it efficiently. Saving arable lands from property development and infrastructural use. More reliance on intercropping and agroforestry. It is also the increased production through vertical expansion increase the total factors productivity by greater awareness and use of good agricultural practices, availability of quality inputs at affordable prices. Second is reduce production and post-production losses and wastage by encouraging the judicious use of chemicals and improved processing facilities. So in here is to establish food go down at convenient places to respond to the needs of vulnerable groups as and when needed. Establish adequate system to forecast shortages and timely import of food grains. Third here is improve financial access of the people to food through employment creation, skill development, and job clearance information networks. It provides income support to the extremely poor by creating social safety nets. It also improves physical access of the people to food by facilitating free movement of food grains throughout the country. Fourth is improve general health care by allocating more resources to promotive and preventive health care, which is more cost effective and helpful in developing countries than the curative. So, population planning for arresting its rapid growth with particular attention to mother and child health care. Pay attention to waterborne diseases which are widespread but can be controlled by dedicated efforts. Food fortification to make it healthy and absorption friendly. Next, proceed to part 7 of the lesson, which is to talk about the global response to the food security. First here is the renewed commitment at global and state level. It is to reduce poverty by dedicating sufficient resources for job creation, skill formation, social safety nets, and ensuring good governance. Second, here is a global collaboration to carry out healthcare reforms. It is to improve absorption and nutrition. Third is putting in place an efficient and reliable forecasting and early warning systems for food grains production and stock position. Fourth, early agreement on global warming, environmental sustainability, and climate change. Fifth is devising fair rules of the game for international trade for equitable share in the increase in global trade and development. Sixth, universal policy framework for corporate farming to restrain land grabbing. Seventh here is lastly, developing regions have registered significant progress towards the Millennium Development Goals, or MDG 1, of reducing poverty, hunger, and undernourishment have fallen by 17% since 1990 to 1992. However, still 1/8 population of the world is not getting enough food for active living. Growth can raise incomes and reduce hunger, but only sustainable and broad-based growth can reduce hunger and poverty. Growth policies must therefore aim at enhancing agricultural productivity, targeting smallholders, and should specifically target the poor, especially those in rural areas. And now to the next reporter.
Good afternoon, everyone. So before I start, I'd like to share to you some short quote. Good food is a source of a genuine happiness. But how it can become a source of genuine happiness if the food that we take is unhealthy and not clean? So let's talk about the key factors affecting the food security or the global food security. So first factor is the population growth. The world population is expected to grow to 9.1 billion by 2050. By 2050, over two-thirds of the global population is projected to live in urban areas, which further puts strains on food systems. So if the population increase, the needs of food also increase. Next factor is the changing in dietary preferences. Globalization has accelerated the spread of Western-style diets, which are high in sugar, salt, fat, and animal-based protein. The shift to unhealthy food habits has led to overweight and obese adults, which increase the development of diet-related diseases. These are some facts. One cow releases between 70 to 120 kg of methane gas per year. Livestock uses 30% of Earth's entire land surface. Next factor is the global water crisis. Water scarcity largely impacts food production. Without water, crops cannot be grown and livestock cannot be raised. The water table reserve in many countries are dangerously low due to overpumping and irrigation. Sources of fresh water are drying up or are getting polluted by domestic and industrial waste. Agriculture accounts for the highest usage of water in the globe. Irrigation specifically takes up approximately 70% of fresh water allocated for human use. Next factor is the climate change. Significantly affects food security. Global warming has resulted to more frequent, more severe, and more extreme disasters like super typhoon, tsunamis, flooding, drought, which damage crop and disrupt access to food. Changes in temperature and rainfall lower the quality and quantity of the crop yield. Heat stress is detrimental to livestock. It makes them vulnerable to disease, lower their milk production, and reduce their fertility. Extreme heat significantly increases water demand and reduces crop productivity. Despite global effort to control greenhouse gas emission, it is estimated that global temperature will rise between 2.7 to 3.7 degrees centigrade by 2100. Next factor is the land degradation, or simply Intensive farming strips the soil of nutrients, leading to decline in agricultural productivity. Example is the use of synthetic fertilizer, I think. Infertile soil needs a lot of external input like fertilizer and water, which increase the cost of farming. Natural resources are being depleted by unsustainable agricultural practices. For example, in Latin America, around 70% of former forests in Amazon have been converted to grazing. Next factor is greedy land deals, or simply selling the agricultural lands and converted it to infrastructure. So, farmlands are being converted into a real estate project such as housing, warehouses, resort, and recreational facilities. Next factor is competition with biofuel. Some argue that corn isn't very rich source of energy, thus it is not worthwhile to divert a sizable portion of corn production for biofuel when a lot of people are hungry. The use of corn for biofuel has also led to the increase of price of corn and consumption. On the other hand, there are those who argue that biofuels are necessary for sustainable source of energy. Thus, it is risky not to further develop their potential. Next factor is declining farmer population. The world relies on the small agriculture producers. Some 500 million smallholder farms worldwide produces over 80% of the food consumed in the developing world. A major cause of worry worldwide is a declining population of farmers. So, if there are no farmers, then where will we get our food? So, the young generation is not inclined to farming due to its many challenges and due to appeal of the occupation, which are physically easier and or higher with economic or social returns. That's all. Thank you. Okay, let's go to the summary and conclusion. To have sufficient buffer stocks available for emergency and different parts to ensure their easy availability in emergency situation. Code of UNO level not to impose restriction on the export of food by the food exporting countries in times of crisis, which aggravate the situation more than the actual crisis. Timely information about the global trends in stocks and production and early warning in case of looming food shortage must be available, like drought and etc. In time import of food grains, whenever a country or a region's stock appear to fall below the danger threshold. However, still 1/8 of the population of the world is not getting enough food for active living. There is a food shortage. Growth can raise incomes and reduces hunger, but only sustainable and broad-based growth can reduce hunger and poverty. Growth policies must therefore aim at enhancing agricultural productivity, targeting smallholders, and should specifically target the poor, especially those in rural areas. Global food security is important to notice since it is related and gives impact to every human being in the world. Global food security is not always about taking care of food that is being consumed by people, but also how this food can be gained and how human can get access to gain adequate food and how country's food security condition is different. There are some aspects that each country needs to improve that food insecurity will not happen to their country. That's all. Thank you.
Around the globe, there are several million farmers. Yet, is there enough food to go round for all people in the world?
The world's population is growing, but today at a global level, agriculture is currently producing 1/3 more calories than necessary to feed all the people in the world. That means, in principle, there is enough food for everybody. Nevertheless, 1 person in 9 goes to bed hungry. Worldwide, there are still 800 million people going hungry.
But why are so many people going hungry?
Because this is not only about the global production level, it is also about making food available, accessible and usable for everybody at all times. If you do not have access to land or enough water, you cannot feed yourself and your family. If you don't have enough money, you cannot buy sufficient food. If due to bad sanitation you fall sick with diarrhea, you can eat as much as you like. The food never reaches your body. Those are just some of the factors which have an impact on whether the foods produced end up on the table and can be absorbed by the body. And this is about more than just chronic hunger.
But why is a filled stomach not enough?
How much food a person has at their disposal is not the only thing that matters. What's relevant is what he or she eats. More than 2 billion people worldwide suffer from vitamin and mineral deficiencies. Their nutrition is too imbalanced and therefore does not contain all important nutrients. This quickly turns into a vicious circle. Mothers with poor nutrition give birth to weak babies who are more susceptible to diseases. The result? In school, they find it hard to concentrate. They also have fewer opportunities on the job market and earn less money. If this is a mass phenomenon, the impact is felt in the entire national economy. And malnutrition is further increasing.
Is there any way out of this vicious circle?
Yes, it is important to promote local agriculture. Farmers, and in particular women, need, for instance, access to fertile land, water and seeds, to markets, to education and loans. Governments need to invest in, for instance, roads, schools, sustainable water management, sanitary installations and a functioning financial system. Living and working in the countryside needs to be attractive. This means that leaving to another town or abroad will no longer seem like the only option for many millions of people.
And what is the German government doing to secure food and nutrition for people worldwide?
The human right to adequate food obliges states to build an enabling environment for people to be free from hunger and malnutrition. The German government supports the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization (FAO) and other UN bodies in their work to progressively realize the right to food. The FAO draws up internationally accepted frameworks and standards for food security and nutrition and provides policy advice to governments, for instance, on legal safeguards for access to land, on strengthening responsible investments, on empowering women and on improving market access. All around the world, Germany promotes FAO pilot projects, school gardens in Afghanistan, nutrition education and soil-preserving cultivation methods in Africa, and adult vocational training for farmers on business management issues.
And what can I do as an individual? So many questions remain. What action is taken against land grabbing? Why are cereals traded on the stock market? And why are more and more people in poor countries overweight?
Our brochure has answers.
News stories have you seen about the world running out of food? How many times have you heard someone justify horrible ideas based on the notion that there's simply not enough to go around? The world is a big place, and we have a lot of mouths to feed, but the problem may not be what you think it is. In this episode, we're going to examine whether the Earth is actually short on food, and look at the broader trends in food production and consumption around the world. Let's rewind a bit. It took thousands of years for the human population to reach the roughly 7.8 billion individuals we have today. From the very first Homo sapiens around 200,000 years ago up until 1804, there were fewer than 1 billion humans on Earth. Then, in just 123 years, the population doubled to 2 billion. More recently, it only took 12 years for the latest billion humans to appear. Our incredible technological advances in medicine, education, and food production since the Industrial Revolution have improved our survival chances and provided enough food for billions more mouths than ever before possible. While this is cause for celebration and admiration of Homo sapiens' achievements, it also raises an important question: how long is this trend going to continue? Food insecurity is becoming a growing concern. All the way back in 1798, the economist Robert Malthus realized that in a world of limited resources, exponential growth cannot be sustained indefinitely and will eventually lead to a dramatic collapse once the growing species overshoots the ability of its support system to provide it with resources. Of course, anytime Malthus is mentioned, we also need to add the disclaimer that there's a reason the term Malthusian is used as an insult. The views espoused by Robert Malthus have been claimed in more recent years by some of the most repugnant groups imaginable. These groups use the economist theories to justify eugenics and racial bigotry to an extreme degree. But regardless of this vocal minority, we still need to consider these questions. Have we already reached this limit? Are we getting close to it? The number of malnourished people around the world is still shockingly high, and millions die from hunger every year. In a world where obesity is the leading cause of death from heart disease and cancer, the top killers in the US, how is it that we still have more than 9 million people dying from hunger every year? To put that number in perspective, every year hunger kills more people than AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis combined. It kills more people than the total population of the world's 72 smallest countries. And most of its victims, 5.3 million of them, are children. But food insecurity does not limit itself to the number of people dying from hunger. It also includes the millions of people who lack access to quality, nutritious foods on a daily basis. While most people in Western countries can generally rely on the availability of food in supermarkets, many around the world are not so lucky. In war-torn Syria, a country which, we should note, suffers under the boot of monstrous US sanctions, women have to stand in line for up to 7 hours for their allotted quota of bread at this very moment. To make matters worse, human-induced climate change threatens our existing food supplies as fresh water begins to run out in many hotter regions. The rise in temperatures also allows new pests to survive in regions that were previously too cool, wiping out entire years' worth of crops and causing famines in some regions of the world. Yet another factor adding to food insecurity is the ever-rising cost of producing food. Farmers at the bottom of the food production process earn little to nothing for their goods, and many are forced to buy seasonal seeds from multinational corporations, meaning that every year they need to buy more or fail to produce their crops. Food production is now part of a global system designed to generate capital, not ensure food security. So why are all these problems worsening to the extent that they threaten that most basic necessity of life? The most vocal claim that population growth is the real problem. Too many mouths to feed and too little food to go around, the Malthusian theory of exponential growth. While this theory is likely correct for any system with limited resources, it did not take into account more modern methods of production, and it would only become a problem for us once we exhausted our tremendous supply of resources. But is our current problem really one of population overshooting resources, or is it more insidious? Is food insecurity just an inevitable consequence of humanity's growth, or could it be due to other factors? Maybe our running out of food is not due to the number of people we need to feed, but to a system that is failing to do its supposed job.